Hi and welcome to another story, and today we have the first part of The Worry Website by Jacqueline Wilson, and a short introduction to start off with from Jacqueline Wilson. I've always been interested in all the worries that whiz around inside people's heads. When I was a little girl, I loved reading the problem pages in my mum's magazines. I'd sympathise with the people who wrote the letters and try to work out what I'd do in their situation. When I started to write stories, I found nearly all my made-up children had problems themselves. I was the writer, so I was the one who had to solve their problems somehow. I have a funny teacher friend, Mr. Hastings, who often tells me what goes on at his school. He said that some of the children in his class found it a bit embarrassing sitting around in a circle discussing their problems, so he'd come up with this idea of a worry box. The children would write on their secret worries and post them into a box, and then he could have a little read and see if he could sort out things for them. I thought this was a brilliant idea, but decided to modernise it a little. I loved the idea of a special classroom worry website. I'd been asked to write a book of short stories, and I thought this worry website idea would be a great way of linking all my characters' different stories. Mr. Speed in the book is very like my friend Mr. Hastings. A girl called Lauren Roberts wrote a prize-winning story so good that we had to include it in the book too. It was meant to be the last story, but it was so sad I had to write another story so that the worry website could have a happy ever after ending. Jacqueline Wilson. The Worry Website. Holly's worry. Type in your worry. Okay, I think I'm going to get a stepmother. There are lots of stepmothers in my favourite book of fairy tales. Don't go yuck boring. Fairy tales are seriously cool, much scarier than any X-rated video you've ever secretly watched in a sleepover. Snow White's stepmother is the scariest of all. She doesn't look scary. She looks beautiful in the picture in my book, though her long queen's robes are spoilt because Hannah tried to colour them with purple wax crayon. I was furious. I felt like snapping the book shut and smacking Hannah around the head with it, even though she's only little and didn't mean to spoil the picture. I minded so because it's such a special book. It used to be our mum's when she was a little girl. She gave it to me. Snow White's mum died when she was born, so she got this stepmother, who looked so lovely that her magic mirror said she was the fairest of them all. But she was evil and mean and dead jealous when the mirror said Snow White was the fairest now, so the stepmother tried to have her chopped into bits, and then she poisoned her with an apple, and she fell down dead and was kept in a glass coffin until a handsome prince came by, yawn, and brought her back to life. The wicked stepmother was so maddened that she boiled with rage, and her shoes stayed so red, hot, she couldn't take them off, and she had to dance until she died. She must have had awful blisters. I've got one where my old trainers are rubbing. Dad doesn't always get it together when we need new shoes. It's not his fault. He's so busy. Yes, it is. I'm not making excuses for my dad anymore. I can't stick him now, and I especially can't stick her. I'm going to add to my worry. I wish she was wicked. That sounds daft. Mr. Speed will think I'm seriously weird. Mind you, Mr. Speed is a little bit weird himself. He's speedy, like his name. He whizzes up and down the school corridors, he dodges round the desks in the classroom, and he skips across the playground. He really did skip once, when Claire brought a skipping rope to school. He could do all sorts of fancy footwork too. But then he tripped and fell over and said a very rude word. He's not a bit like the other teachers. This worry website is all his idea. It's instead of circle time. You know, when you all sit in a circle fidgeting and you're meant to discuss your problems. Sometimes it's dead boring because someone like Samantha bangs on about missing her dad. Everyone always feels very sorry for Samantha because she's so little and pretty with lovely long fair hair. Even Mr. Speed has a special smiley way of looking at her that makes me sick. Sometimes circle time is terribly embarrassing because someone stupid, like poor William, confides the sort of problem that should stay a deadly secret. He told the whole class that he wets the bed, and his dad yells at him and makes him cry, and his mum says she can't keep up with washing his sopping sheets. Some of the kids giggled, and poor William looked as if he was going to cry again. Mr. Speed got very fierce with the gigglers and praised William for being so honest and sensible over a tiny physical problem that perhaps happens to heaps of people. But even Mr. Speed couldn't stop half the class calling poor William Wetty Willy in the playground. So maybe that's why he came up with the worry website idea. I've designed the super cool, wacky, wicked website in the classroom computer, okay? Anytime any of you have a problem, then access the worry website when it's your turn on the computer and type it in. You don't need to put your name. Then we can all contribute our comments and suggestions. Make them kind and constructive, or I'll leap up and down on you in my Doc Martens. Got it? We got it. Everyone started typing in their worries. Someone had a good long moan about their sneaky sister and their brainy brother. Someone was worried about being bottom of the class. Someone wrote about having scary nightmares. Someone was sad because their pet rat had just died. One of the boys wrote that he liked one of the girls a lot. That made everyone giggle, and Greg went very pink. I wonder who he fancies. Someone also went on and on. Oh, boo-hoo, it's so sad, I miss my dad, etc., etc. We all know who that was. At least Samantha can still see her dad when she goes to stay with him and his new girlfriend. Well, I see my mum. Sometimes. I have to take my little sister Hannah so she can get to know our mum. She left when Hannah was just a baby. Mum had depression, which made her very sad, so she cried a lot and then ran off. When she ran off, I guess Dad and Hannah and I got depression too, because we all felt very sad and cried a lot as well. It felt very scary when Dad cried, so I told him that it was okay. I'd look after him and Hannah now. I do look after both of them. I've been almost like Hannah's mum. When she was a baby, I fed her and washed her and dressed her and changed her. Yucky, but you have to do it. I cuddled her lots and played peekaboo. And you know something? The very first word she said was Holly. That's my name. She said millions and millions and millions of words since. She's a total chatterbox. She's in the reception class at my school, and Miss Morgan obviously adores her, though she always gets into trouble for talking. She even talks during story time. She doesn't mean to be naughty, she just likes to join in. I read to her at bedtime from my special book of fairy tales. She likes Red Riding Hood best, especially the wolf bits. Oh, Grandma, what big teeth you've got, I say in a teeny tiny Red Riding Hood voice, and then Hannah shrieks, "Oh, they're better to eat you all up!" and bounces up out of the bed at me, gnashing her teeth. Once she bit me on the nose by accident. She can be a very boisterous baby sister. My favourite fairy tale is Snow White. When I read the start of the story out loud and say the Snow White's hair is as black as coal, and her skin as white as snow, and her lips as red as berries, Hannah always shouts, "Holly berries!" and stabs at the picture with her finger. "That's you, Holly," she says. I wish. I don't look the slightest bit like Snow White. I have got red lips, especially if I've been eating red Smarties. But I often have a red nose too. I get lots of colds. My hair is straggly mouse, though my nails are sometimes as black as coal. Snow White is as pretty as a picture. Her picture in the book is beautiful, with tiny glass mirrors and red apples all round the border, and Snow White herself is wearing a white dress, embroidered all over with tiny gold stars. Snow White is small too, not that much bigger than the 7 dwarfs, and she's thin as a pin. I am not pretty. I am as plain as an empty page and a bit on the podgy side too. I don't care. I take after my dad. I used to be glad. I used to love my dad so much. Whenever he collects us from the after-school club, he always says, "Where are my special girlfriends?" I've always been his big grown-up girlfriend and Hannah his teeny tiny girlfriend, but now Dad is a real girlfriend. I'm scared she's going to come and live with us and be my stepmother, and it's not fair. Yes, it is so fair, said Hannah. We want her to be our mother. No, we've got a mother already. You remember, Hannah, I said. Not really, said Hannah. We haven't gone on a visit to our mum for quite a while. We want to, but the last time we didn't get on with Mum's new boyfriend, Mike. Oh, yes, he shouted and we cried, said Hannah. You cried? I'm not a baby, I said. You did so cry, I saw. I don't like that Mike, or our mum, said Hannah. Yes, you do, I insisted. No, I like our new mum much, much, much more, said Hannah. You will never guess who this new mum is going to be. Miss Morgan. Yes, that's Miss Morgan, Hannah's teacher. I love her to bits, said Hannah happily. Dad loves her to bits too. I suppose I used to like her just a little bit myself. I used to take Hannah into her classroom every morning. Dad has to drop us off at school very early, or else he'll be late for work. Miss Morgan is always there, though. I used to like seeing what she was wearing. She doesn't look a bit like a teacher. She's got long hair way past her shoulders, and she wears long dresses too, all bright and embroidered. And she had these purple suede pointy boots with high heels. She looks as if she stepped straight out of my fairy story book. I liked the way her reception classroom looked too. It was all so bright and cosy and small. I'd hang about for a while, keeping an eye on Hannah, showing her the water trough, and the giant building bricks, and the powder paints, and the playhouse. I especially loved the playhouse. I hadn't had much time for playing since Hannah was born. I suddenly wanted to scrunch up small and squeeze in through the tiny door and squat safe inside, too little to do anything else but play. I didn't, of course. I'm not daft like poor William. But Miss Morgan saw me staring, and the next day when I dropped Hannah off, she asked me if I'd be sweet enough to tidy up the dolls and the little beds and tables and chairs, because all those 4-year-olds had got them all higgledy-piggledy. I sighed a bit, like I didn't really want to, and then I leant through the open window of the playhouse and sorted it all out. It was kind of fun. I don't know why. Doing it for real is no fun at all. Still, the Playhouse dolls didn't whine or fidget or refuse to put their arms in their cardie like someone I could mention. The next morning Miss Morgan said, "Guess what, Holly? The Playhouse is a mess again." I sighed and I said, "I suppose you want me to fix it." And so it got to be a bit of a habit. I also put fresh water in the trough and cleaned up the sandpit and tested out the building bricks to see if there were enough to make a proper fairy tale palace, like the pictures in my book. Hannah didn't join in these early morning games. She just wriggled into Miss Morgan's lap and chattered to her non-stop. "Feel free to tip her off your lap whenever you get tired. She does tend to go on," I said. Miss Morgan didn't seem to mind a bit. I sometimes wished I could climb on her lap and chatter too, just like Hannah. Miss Morgan used to be my favourite teacher in the school, even better than Mr. Speed. Dad met Mr. Speed and Miss Morgan when he came to parents' evening. Dad said that Mr. Speed was very pleased with my progress, and that he said I was a very good, sensible girl, and a little star of his class. I twinkled. Dad said that Miss Morgan was very pleased with Hannah too, and that she said she was very lively and loving. If Miss Morgan had said Hannah was very good or sensible, she would be a terrible fibber. "Mr. Speed's smashing, isn't he, Dad?" I said happily. "Yes, he is," said Dad. "Miss Morgan's rather special too, isn't she?" Dad took to coming into Hannah's class with us every morning, even though it made him late for work. Then Miss Morgan came round to our house with some special wax crayons for Hannah. Big mistake. Remember Snow White Stepmother's purple robe. And some rainbow metallic pens for me. The next Saturday, surprise, surprise, we just happened to bump into Miss Morgan in the children's library. We all chatted for a bit, and then we took Hannah to the swings. And then we all had lunch at McDonald's. Before we knew what was happening, we were seeing Miss Morgan every single Saturday, and sometimes Sundays too. I didn't mind a bit at first. I know this makes me the most seriously stupid, dumb dot-head, but there you are. Even poor William would have twigged what was going on, but I thought Miss Morgan was my friend, and Hannah's too, of course. I didn't dream that she was there because of our dad. Miss Morgan is pretty as a princess. Our dad doesn't look a bit like a handsome prince. Well, not the ones in my fairy tale book. They don't wear baggy t-shirts and tracksuit bottoms and fluffy socks with holes in the toes, though Dad got all dressed up with a suit on Friday night. "I'm going out, girls. I've asked Auntie Evie up the road to babysit." "We don't need Auntie Evie. She fusses too much," I said, pulling her face. "I'll babysit for Hannah, Dad." "I know you're just like a little mother to Hannah, love, but I'd feel happier if Auntie Evie was here to keep an eye on things," said Dad, tying the knot in the funny Simpsons tie Hannah and I gave him last birthday. He only wears his tie if he's going somewhere really special. "Are you going out somewhere posh with your mates from work, Dad?" I asked. "No, love," said Dad, sprucing his hair in the mirror. "Why, does it always stick straight up?" "Maybe you need some hair gel, Dad." He peered in the mirror, his head at an odd angle. "You don't think I'm going thin on the top, do you, Holly?" "Yeah, like you've always almost totally bald," I said, teasing him. "Leave it out, Dad. You've got lovely thick hair." "You're a great little kid, Holly," said Dad, giving me a hug. "So, where are you going, Dad?" Dad looked in the mirror rather than at me. "I'm taking Jenny out for a meal." "Jenny?" Dad went red. "You know, Miss Morgan." I stared at him. Hannah bounced up. "A meal? Can we come too? Can we go to McDonald's?" Hannah begged. No, you wouldn't want to come, Hannah. We're going to this Indian place." "I like Italian food. I like spaghetti," Hannah insisted. "Well, maybe you and Holly can come with us another time, but this is a meal just for grown-ups," said Dad. "It's a date," I said. I spat the word out as if it was deadly poison. "You and Miss Morgan? You're going out with her?" "You don't mind, do you?" said Dad. "You like Jenny, Miss Morgan." "We love her," said Hannah. "Oh, Dad, is she your girlfriend now?" "Well, sort of," said Dad, positively beetroot. "Oh, great, great, great," Hannah shouted. "Here, Dad, why don't you marry Miss Morgan, and then she can be our mum?" "Not so fast, teeny tiny girlfriend," said Dad, and he picked Hannah up and swung her round and round. Her feet flew out and her left Pokemon slipper clunked me straight on the head. I made a lot of fuss, though my head didn't really hurt a bit. It was inside me that was hurting. My dad and Miss Morgan. "What's up, big grown-up girlfriend?" said Dad. "Is your head really sore? Shall I kiss it better?" "I'm not a baby." "Don't be so daft," I snapped. "Save your kissing for Miss Morgan." Dad looked like I'd thrown a bucket of cold water all over him. He blinked at me. "I thought you'd be dead chuffed like Hannah," he said. "You like Jenny?" "Holly, I don't get it." I didn't really get it either. I just knew it was all spoilt now, and I carried on spoiling it. We still went out every Saturday, but I mucked it up. I sighed and fussed and moaned in the children's library. Whenever Miss Morgan picked out some book she thought I might enjoy, I'd glance at it and give a big yawn and go, "Boring." So she found picture books for Hannah instead. Dad and Miss Morgan sat squashed together on one of those silly, saggy cushion chairs, while Hannah, tucked under their chins, looked at the pictures in the book. They looked like a real family already. The girl behind the counter in McDonald's thought they were a family too. Hannah jumped up and said she wanted a giant portion of French fries and 5 ice creams, and the girl laughed and looked at Miss Morgan and said, "Perhaps we'd better ask Mum first." "She's not our mum," I said fiercely. When we sat down with our food, I thumped my plastic tray so hard my milkshake tipped and trickled all over me, and quite a bit of Miss Morgan too. "For goodness sake, Holly, what's the matter with you?" said Dad, mopping at Miss Morgan with his paper napkin. He just let me drip. "You're behaving like a total idiot." "You're the total idiot," I muttered, not softly enough. "I've just about had enough of you, showing me up and behaving so badly," Dad hissed. "Here, Holly, let's go to the ladies and get some paper towels," said Miss Morgan, in a friendly but very firm teacher's voice, so I couldn't quite manage to say no. When we were in the ladies, she didn't mess around with the milkshake stains. She put her hands on my shoulders and looked me straight in the eyes. "It's okay, Holly. I understand the way you feel." "No, you don't," I said sulkily. I didn't know how she could understand when I didn't have a clue why I felt so bad and was acting bad into the bargain. "I like your dad, and he seems to like me," said Miss Morgan. "Yuck," I said. "Yes, okay. It seems very yucky to you. It probably would to me if I was in the same situation." The really yucky thing was she was being so nice to me, so soft and sweet. It made me feel fiercer than ever. "I promise you, I'm not trying to take the place of your mum. I know just how much she means to you. She'll always stay your mum, and Hannah's, forever and ever, even though you don't see her anymore." "We do so see her," I shouted. "We see her lots and lots and lots, so you can just shut up and stay away from me and my family." I rushed into a cubicle and locked the door and wouldn't come out for ages. In fact, Dad had to come into the ladies to get me out, and it was dead embarrassing, and everyone was staring. I managed to hold things in until I was in bed, that night, and then I cried and cried and cried. I tried to cry quietly, but I woke Hannah. "Are you crying because you've been so bad?" she whispered. She had been awestruck by my behaviour. "I'm not crying. I've just got a cold," I snuffled, blowing my nose. I really did get a cold the next day, and I made such a fuss that Dad let me stay off school. Auntie Evie up the road came to keep an eye on me. When she dozed off watching Neighbours after lunch, I crept into the hall and made a phone call to my mum. Mum didn't know who I was at first. Well, she did. She just didn't recognise my voice and said, "Who?" suspiciously as if it was someone playing a joke on her. "It's me, Mum," I paused. I wondered if I was going to have to add, "You know, Holly, your daughter." "What do you want, Holly? Is something wrong?" "No, yes, it's Dad." "Well, what about him? He's not ill, is he? Because I can't really have you girls to stay at the moment, as I'm not too great myself, and I'm having all sorts of dramas with Mike, and..." She went on and on and on and on, and then she remembered. "Anyway, what about your dad?" He's got a girlfriend." "Has he?" She sounded so casual, as if I'd just announced he'd got a new tie. "She's a teacher at our school." "Oh well, that figures. It's the only way your dad would ever meet anyone." I hated the way Mum always sounded so sniffy about Dad, like he was the most boring man on earth. "Don't you mind, Mum?" "Well, what's it got to do with me?" It's serious. She might end up our stepmother." "Oh, isn't she very nice to you then?" She's... I couldn't quite tell an outright lie. She's okay." "Then what are you worried about, eh?" "Well, she could turn out horrid. Most stepmothers are, like in Snow White." "Ah, Snow White. I had that fairy tale book when I was a little girl." "I know. You gave it to me." I can't stand it when Mum forgets things. Sometimes it feels as if she's forgotten all about me. I wanted her to tell her how much I loved her and missed her, but the words wouldn't sort themselves out. And while I was still wondering how to say it, Mum said, "Well, I've got to go now, Holly. See you. Bye." So I put the phone down. I stopped feeling I loved her, and I hated her for a bit. She said, "See you," but she doesn't want to. She doesn't even like talking to me on the phone much now. Dad says it's because she feels bad about leaving us. I think maybe she's bad. I take after her now. I went back to school the next day because it was dead depressing staying at home. My nose was sniffier than ever, and so was I. Samantha was showing off her new hair slides, which were like little butterflies, but I simply yawned and said they looked stupid. Samantha said I was just jealous because she had long, fairy curls, and I didn't. I said I didn't care one bit about having long, fair curls. Big lie. Greg said he didn't think long, fair curls were all that great, and he much preferred my hair. Old Greg is going as daft as a poor William, if you ask me. Mr. Speed told me to hand the marked homework out and asked me to read aloud to the others and sent me with a message to the head. I bashed the homework books bang on the desks. I read aloud in a bored, flat, can't-be-bothered voice, and I dawdled down the corridor so slowly after giving my message I missed half the lesson. "I wonder why you're in such a bad mood today, Holly," said Mr. Speed. I shrugged and pouted. Mr. Speed imitated me. He looked so funny I very nearly gave in and giggled. Maybe you need a bit of peace and quiet. I know. How about a little computer practice? I knew this was a crafty ploy. Mr. Speed wanted me to access the Worry website. And I couldn't resist. I typed it in, remember? I think I'm going to get a stepmother. I wish she was wicked. Comments? You're nuts. What is she on about? How do you know the person with a worry is a girl? Because it's such a silly girly thing. You're being dead sexist. Look, what about her problem? What problem? Heaps of kids get stepmothers. I've got one and she's okay. I've got a mum and dad and a stepmum and a stepdad, and it's great at Christmas and birthdays because you get 2 lots of presents. Why do you want a wicked stepmother? I've got a wicked stepmother. You can have mine. I didn't think these comments particularly kind or constructive. There were other even more useless suggestions that I deleted. I sat staring at the screen, wishing I could delete myself. Mr. Speed saw me and whizzed right over before I could quit the website. Aha! So, you're having a peep at the Worry website, Holly. Interesting worry. Have you typed in your comment for this poor soul who wants a wicked stepmother? He was trying to kid me that the website is ultra-anonymous, but I'm not daft. I gave him a long, hard look. I'm the poor soul, Mr. Speed. You know it's me. Yes, that's very true, Holly. You've caught me out. You haven't put a comment. That's also true. OK. He leaned over me and typed. I don't know why you want a wicked stepmother. Perhaps you can elaborate. He waited. I fidgeted. Elaborate means tell me more, said Mr. Speed. I know. I don't know how, though. It's all muddly. It's my dad and Miss Morgan. Mr. Speed's eyes opened wide. Our Miss Morgan? This is highly confidential, Mr. Speed, I said hurriedly. Mum's the word, said Mr. Speed, finger on his lips. So I told him. His eyes got wider and wider like the dog in the fairy tale with eyes as big as dinner plates. Your dad's a very lucky man, he said eventually. And I should imagine young Hannah's thrilled. So how do you feel, Holly? I feel bad, I said. And I keep acting bad, and then I feel even worse, and Miss Morgan is always so nice about it. I want her to be bad. If she was really wicked like Snow White's stepmother, well, then I could hate her, and be horrid to her, and it would be perfectly okay. I can't quite imagine Miss Morgan trying to force you to eat poisoned apples, said Mr. Speed, let alone hiring an axeman to chop you into little bits in the middle of the forest. I think I've got a worry that can't be solved, I said gloomily. Well, we could just fiddle with the meaning of the wicked. I've always thought Miss Morgan an ultra-lovely, delightful young woman. This is also highly confidential, Holly. I especially admire her amazing purple boots. We could well say she looks seriously wicked, right? I groaned. Sorry, Mr. Speed shook his head at me apologetically. I'll work on it, but there aren't always easy answers to worries. You know that. Tell you something, though. You're not bad. You're still my little star. You'll get that twinkle back soon, you'll see. I kept out of Miss Morgan's way last week. I delivered Hannah off the door of the reception class but didn't go in myself. Dad went out with Miss Morgan on Friday night, but he came home early when I was still sitting up in bed, reading my fairy tale book. He popped his head around the door to tell me to put the light off and go to sleep. He seemed all sad and scowly. Maybe he'd had a row with Miss Morgan. However, she came round to our house on Saturday looking extra especially lovely, in a long purple dress with little mirrors all around the hem. Let me see if I can see my face, said Hannah, kneeling down and peering into each mirror. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all? Mirror, mirror on her skirt, who is acting like a stupid little squirt, I said, yanking Hannah upright. Ouch! You're so grumpy now, Holly. I don't want you to come round the town with us because you spoil everything, said Hannah. Good. I don't want to come, I said, but I felt bad. Bad. My eyes went all watery because even Hannah didn't want me any more. I think we won't all go round the town today, said Miss Morgan. Her eyes were as glittery as the little mirrors on her skirt. Maybe Holly and I might just go shopping together. What about me, said Hannah indignantly. I'll take you to the library and the swings, Hannah, and then we'll have an ice cream or 2, or 3 or 4 or 5 in McDonald's, OK? Said Dad. Hannah had her mouth open to protest bitterly, but she got sidetracked by the ice cream bribe. Maybe my mouth was open too. I didn't get what was going on. I don't want to go shopping, I said. Yes, you do. If you've got money in your pocket, said Dad, and he handed me a £10 note. I couldn't believe it. £10, all for me. So I sloped off with Miss Morgan. I decided I wasn't going to speak to her, though. Not one word all the way into town. But the weird thing was, she didn't say one word to me either. She just strode along in her purple pointy boots, and whenever I glanced at her, she glared at me. I'd never seen her glare before, not even when Hannah's reception class got really, really rowdy and started throwing powder paint about. It might have been Hannah who started it because she ended up rainbow-coloured right down to her knickers. It's sort of scary when a smiley person goes all glary. The silence was starting to get on my nerves, so much that I blurted out, "I want to go to Claire's Accessories to get some of those little butterfly slides, and maybe one of those little lucky bead bracelets." Miss Morgan sniffed. "You're lucky all right, Holly. Your dad spoils you so, and you've certainly been acting like a spoilt brat recently. I'm getting sick of it." I stared at her. It was as if she'd suddenly started spitting toads. "You're not supposed to talk to me like that. You're a teacher, and I'm also your dad's girlfriend. And if you'd only give us a chance, I think we'd be really happy together. But you just want to muck everything up, don't you? Can't you see how unhappy you're making your dad? He's only unhappy because of you. You've mucked up everything. He was really great before when it was just Hannah and Dad and me." "You felt great," said Miss Morgan, and she stamped her foot so that her skirt swung and all the little mirrors glittered. "Don't you realise how lonely your dad felt? He wasn't a bit lonely. And anyway, maybe my mum might come back and then he'd have her, wouldn't he? You know perfectly well your mum isn't ever going to come back. And even if she did, your dad wouldn't want her. She walked out on all of you, even little Hannah. I don't see how you could ever have done that. Why do you act like she's so wonderful when she could do a wicked thing like leave her own children? You're wicked and I hate you. I wish you'd stomp off in your silly boots and never come back." Tears spilled down my cheeks. "Why did you have to turn out so horrible?" "Oh, Holly," said Miss Morgan. Tears streamed down her cheeks too. "I'm sorry. I am wicked. I don't want to be horrible. I can't do this anymore. It's awful. I like you too much." "No, you don't. No one does. No one wants me." "I want you very, very much," she said. She put her arms around me and we hugged right there in the street. I cried and she cried. We kept on hugging. I sniffed so much I dripped on her purple dress, but she didn't mind a bit. She found her hanky and I blew my nose, and she blew her nose too. And then we went off to this posh coffee shop and had wonderful grown-up frothy coffee and an apple Danish pastry each. I had difficulty eating mine at first because I had hiccups from all that crying. Miss Morgan saw me hesitating. "They're not poisoned apples, I promised," she said. I peered at her suspiciously, spooning up the froth from my coffee. "What's Mr. Speed been saying to you?" "Mr. Speed," said Miss Morgan, dead nonchalant. She shook her head, tossing her lovely long hair over her shoulder. "Oh, nothing in particular." You know what teachers are like. They always back each other up. I think Mr. Speed might have told her my worry, even though it's supposed to be confidential. He was just trying to act like a fairy godmother and grant my wish. I had a sudden vision of Mr. Speed in a fairy frock, clutching a wand, and I laughed so much I blew the rest of my froth off my coffee. "What?" said Miss Morgan, giggling a bit too. "Oh, nothing in particular," I said. I thought for a bit. "Miss Morgan, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I said all that stuff. I didn't really hate you." "I'm sorry too, Holly. I didn't mean all that stuff I said either. I was just feeling fed up and worried because your dad said on Friday that we might have to stop seeing each other if it was making you so unhappy. He always puts you and Hannah first." "Well, you come second," I said, patting her hand, "and I'll tell Dad I don't really want you two to break up." "Yes, you might end up with a real wicked stepmother," said Miss Morgan, and she pulled this dreadful, frowny, ferocious face. I laughed and she laughed, and we both knew we'd kind of made friends. They never seem to do that in fairy stories, do they? Then we went shopping and I bought Miss Morgan a little comb for her long, thick hair, and I got Dad some gel for his short, thinning hair. I found some butterfly slides, but I bought them for Hannah. I chose special little gold star slides for me. Miss Morgan said they really, really suited me. I wore them to school on Monday, and Greg said they looked lovely, and Mr. Speed said I seemed to be twinkling splendidly. He had a twinkle in his eye too. Miss Morgan said she's going to make Hannah and me special dresses. Hannah's is going to have little mirrors, and mine is going to have stars embroidered all over. I suppose they could just be bridesmaids' dresses. And there we will leave the first part of The Worry Website by Jacqueline Wilson. Hope you enjoyed that one, guys. I will be back soon with lots more stories and videos coming your way very soon. If you would like to subscribe or hit a like, that's always appreciated. Thanks for listening, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.